Hey, Patrice, Guillaume, Brianna. All right, so we don't want to penalize those that came on time, so we're gonna just start with a little introduction. For those of you who've been here before, uh, welcome back. And for the new ones, well, this is a series that was created in the context of one of our programs called Focus, and we've decided to open it to the public because some of that information may be pertinent to people that have not been selected to the program Focus. So it was a way for us to give back to the community and be present and be supportive, even without the direct coaching. We've covered so many different topics throughout the series, from IP to financing, public financing, tax credits, and today we're closing this series with private investments and VC money. And we've asked our friends from Panache VC to come and do this presentation because we couldn't think of anybody better to do this presentation, and specifically David giving his entertainment background, which is quite relevant to all of you.
So
I'm not going to do
So
what?
no, I'm the dessert or something,
So, yeah, exactly.
or breakfast at this time, more like it.
You're the dessert, yeah. So I'm not gonna do the presentation for David because I think he's better placed to present himself, and I think he planned that anyway in his presentation. I'm gonna be there to take your questions, so do not hesitate at any moment, any time to type in your question in the chat or the Q&A section. The cue of we're gonna take a question is I'm gonna be opening my camera again. So when you see me on the screen, it means that somebody's gonna say something that is not David or me. So do not hesitate. I'll activate your mic and you'll be able to speak to David directly. He's a very nice guy, so don't be afraid to ask any question. There are no wrong questions. All right. Hi, David.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Salut tout le monde. Thanks, No, for the quick intro. So yeah, don't hesitate to interrupt us during the workshop. Usually this is like I've done this a few times, or usually in front of people. So don't hesitate to raise your hand or ask a question in the chat during, because it's always very unstructured, borderline chaotic, and that's the way I like it. So my goal is I'm going to quickly introduce myself, introduce Panache Ventures, our firm, and what we do and what we look for as investors, and then talk a little bit more about venture capital very briefly, but mostly what venture capital investors or VCs look for when they meet startups and founders, and which also means like how you should pitch your startup if you want to raise venture capital, and how you should build a narrative around your startup or your project. And then want to leave a lot of room, a lot of time for Q&A, and really ask me anything. If you like, no question is too harsh or too dumb. So yeah, please don't hesitate. So let me maybe quickly, can I do this? Start by, yeah. I'm gonna share this screen so you can you guys, Lenore, let me know if you don't see my LinkedIn profile.
We're good. We're
But
seeing.
yeah, perfect. So that's quickly my career. I kind of started as a junior like analyst in venture capital in the early 2000s. Worked at Desjardins and worked at JLA Ventures, which is now renamed Relay Ventures. And then after, what's that, like 8 years of working in junior roles in venture capital, I kind of jumped the fence and ended up joining a company named Bandzoogle as their CEO. And Bandzoogle is a website platform where mostly bands and musicians build their website and their online store and their photo galleries, their tour calendars. So it was a really cool experience, like working, like building technology for artists and traveling the world to mostly music industry conferences and festivals, and got exposed to all facets of a extremely complex industry. So that was a really great learning experience, compounded by the fact that I'm not really a musician myself, or I'm a terrible one, but I'm a huge music fan. So to enable me to discover all kinds of like fucking weird music that I love so much. And which kind of led me, after I left Bandzoogle, I joined a company that is slightly better known named Bandcamp, that's based in California. I worked with them for about a year as a full-time consultant, helping them refine the strategy and redo the product roadmap. And then I came back to venture capital, what now, 4 years ago, or yeah, 4 years ago, as a partner in the 500 Startups Canada Fund, which later kind of became Panache Ventures. And we've been investing the Panache Ventures Fund for, let me switch back to my presentation here. Yeah. And yeah, so Panache Ventures is a little bit more than 2 years old now. And that should be, yeah, that's the team, back from the days where it was fine to be really close to people. And back in the day, it was a little bit colder. So our team is split, and I'll tell you more about this, but our team is split between Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and part-time Vancouver. Our thesis is to become the best VC firm at the pre-seed and seed stages. So I'll explain a little bit more what that means. But we're, compared to most firms, we're a relatively small firm that does a relatively high number of smaller investments pretty early in a startup's life cycle. Fund is 58 million. We're going to do about 100 investments in about 100 startups, and we've done 69 so far. So we have about 30 left in this first fund, and we're probably going to start raising our second fund next year. And the rest is kind of typical. Like typically, and like I realize that venture capital you guys might not all be super familiar, but funds have a lifetime of 10 years. But we always invest in the first 3 or 4 years of the fund. So as of like late next year, we should be managing the portfolio we've built with the first fund, but doing new investments out of the second fund. But if you guys have questions later on about how VC firm work or the mechanics of a fund and a firm, you let me know. I'll be happy to answer them. This is just to show that, like, very quickly, we've become one of the most active investors in terms of number of deals and number of companies we work with. We're definitely one of the most active investors in Canada and in Quebec. That's our team, split, like I said, across Canada. The top line there is the 4 partners, and we have 4 staff on the team, and a good group of advisors and venture partners who are people that aren't on our payroll, aren't directly investors or part of our team, but work with us as advisors or bring us deal flow or work with some of our specific companies. This is the portfolio as of maybe a month ago. So I think there's probably a couple companies missing, but kind of shows you the diversity of the sectors we invest in. You can check out our website at panache.vc to kind of check out the websites of these companies. But again, most of them are in Canada. Like, our focus is Canada, but we have made a few investments in the US and one in an Israeli company. The themes or the sectors that we invest in is pretty broad, and we've definitely made exceptions. But in Canada, like in the recent years, like, these are sectors where there's a specific strength. I think there's a lot of talent in Canada around fintech, around AI, obviously. Digital health has been a recurring theme, and like compounded by the COVID and pandemic. We've done a number of deals in enterprise software. We've done a few in blockchain, not as many as we thought initially. And then lately, women in tech, or femtech, has become a theme that we're actively looking for new investments. Because of COVID-19 and confinement, and also partly the recession that will happen. No one really knows for how long and how deep. But these are themes that where we think the pandemic is going to accelerate investment in those sectors. So we're kind of doubling down on the deal flow we look at. So digital health, obviously, supply chains. I think people have realized that, like, just the lack of PPE equipment, like the dependence on China for many industries, has shown that supply chains will need to become more agile and maybe delocalized, maybe smaller scale, but more diversified. So that's a theme that we're looking at. Automation and robotics, I think, will be areas where investment will increase. Obviously, online collaboration, like up to 3 months ago, the the percentage of population that knew about Zoom has probably gone 10x times 10,000. So, but that's, that's only part of it. There's a lot of like more specialized industry specific online collaboration tools that are seeing a lot of investment. So that's an aspect we're looking at. Security, because everyone working from home is, it involves a lot more secure link compliance issues. And lastly, e-commerce. Like everyone's been realized that you can actually buy groceries online now, and cosmetics and sports equipment. So we're trying to predict what the longer term as what we mean longer term for technologies, and also the impact on things like last mile logistics. So in the grand scheme, no questions so far, Noor, on Panache or myself, and I'm happy to answer them later. Or where we fit.
We have a question from Laurent, so we'll take that
okay.
now. Laurent, you have the mic.
Or two of them, seems like it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, no, I was just wondering, do you guys invest in like a B2C sharing economy concept? Is that something that you look at, or?
You're gonna have to repeat that because your sound was garbled.
Okay, no, sorry. I was wondering if you would look at like a B2C sharing economy companies, or it's out of your.
Yeah, no, it's not. There's no sector that we automatically disqualify, or no business model that we automatically disqualify, except maybe things that are too capital intensive.
Okay.
Because we write small checks, and like so companies like biotech or pharma that have like 15-year cycles before they get a product to market and probably never generate revenue is not for us. Like hard tech, where you need to build an usine, like a plant or heavy manufacturing, is not for us. Otherwise, anything that touches software or even B2C, we've done B2C deals in consumer packaged goods, for example. Sharing economy, maybe. Like all that said, you're going to see in the second half of this presentation the rest of our criteria. So, but yeah, we wouldn't disqualify it outright.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'll continue. Oh, I think my Google thinks I asked it a question. The investment stages. So typically the venture capital lifecycle looks something like this. Like at the ideation stage is what I call the napkin stage, where you just had an idea. You want to build a prototype or just do some customer discovery to understand what the market needs. Like that's typically too early for us. Where we play and start investing is usually at the seed stage. And sometimes the pre-seed stage. Usually the pre-seed will do when it's founders that have a background. Either founders we know because we've worked with them in the past. They've had startups previously, or maybe they were employee 3 and 4 at a company that scaled, like a Lightspeed or or Shopify, for example, like early employees that have had that experience of scaling companies. Like that kind of removes some execution risk when we analyze the opportunity. And sometimes we're open at coming in earlier, but we're usually between like the rounds where angel investors and friends and family will help seed a company, and later stages where larger firms come in. So typically we kind of bridge the gap between the two. And so we'll invest at the pre-seed and seed stage. Sometimes we'll follow on in the Series A, and our goal is really to get our companies to get to the best Series A possible with the best investors possible. But then we take a back seat. So typically when companies keep scaling and raising larger rounds and get to Series B, Series C, we take a back seat and we've done our job, basically. So if you look at the Canadian ecosystem, like that's where we play pre-seed, seed. And these are examples of firms that typically will invest at later stages. To give you an example of a trajectory that we try to, so what I said earlier, we're going to do about 100 deals. Our goal is that within that group, there's going to be a few companies. Like obviously, it won't be dozens, but a few companies that are able to achieve this type of trajectory. Like Twilio is a US-based company that our friends at 500 Startups have invested in the seed stage. And so you kind of see over time where they raise their seed $1 million, a little bit later they're A, a little bit later they're B, then C, D, all the way to an IPO that value them at 2.5 billion. And I haven't checked the market cap at Twilio recently, but I know it's well above that. But typically the goal for a firm like us is to enter at the seed and then exit either at the D or E or at the IPO. So if we're able to do that and find good companies that have that trajectory, we'll have done our job. Is there a question?
Yes, Natalia. She has a question around the women in tech investments that you do. Natalia, you have the mic.
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Good.
I'm good.
So yeah, I was curious to hear a bit more about the women in tech. What's your experience about that?
Well, it's kind of a broad sector, but it's kind of a portmanteau term that includes every technology or product or service that is specifically targeting women. So for example, recently we invested in a Toronto startup named Lilia, which is a platform for women to gain or control their reproductive cycle. So things like if you want to freeze your eggs because of the for any reason, like it's a platform that will help you do that. Fertility tests. So it's kind of a technology-driven service that helps women have all the information, education, and keep control over their reproduction. We've also invested in a CPG company that is targeting Gen Z women, in their first years of having to deal with feminine hygiene, and then they add cosmetics to that. So, and yeah, sometimes it will be more financial instruments, but yeah, or technologies related to motherhood. So yeah, it's very broad, but it's been access to workforce. So it's it's kind of a broad theme, but it's drawing a lot of investment lately.
Yeah. So it's really solutions that target women's issues.
Yeah.
Got it.
Got it. Thank you.
A comparable theme that's also pretty popular for investment these days is silver tech, what is called silver tech, which is technologies for aging people. And I think with the pandemic and what we've seen happen in the residential homes, I think we're going to see a lot more investment in that category as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Christian who's raised his hand. So Christian, you have the mic as well. Thank you, Natalia, by the way, for your question.
And you guys can ask your questions in French if you're more comfortable, and I can answer them in French and English. And that's it. I don't have any other languages.
Christian, go ahead.
Hi, David. How are you?
Hello. Hi.
I can't see myself, but I'm sure you can hear me or see me.
I can hear you.
Great. So I have some questions. So one is sort of like how can you add? How can you help? What's your sort of, how does Panache really come in if that's such a wide range of technologies that you invest in? What are the areas that really like you can come in at the pre-seed level? This is my kind of area of interest because I have investment that I was looking at.
Yeah.
In the energy tech and a project that I've been working on. And just more generally, like where's Panache's value add when it comes to after the venture,
how we have value to our companies? Okay.
Once the investment is made.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a really good question, and and in our case, we are a small team that manages a large portfolio. So the answer is that it varies a lot from company to company. Like in the market, there are certain types of investors that are completely hands off, that will invest and kind of tell you, I don't want to hear anything. Let me know in 10 years or let me know the big news, but I don't want him involved. Then at the opposite end of the spectrum, there are investors that are really hands-on that will almost work in the company, or they're going to be on the board. They're going to be super involved. We kind of sit in between, and I kind of call it as if. whereas some of our companies were more involved and some were less involved. And whether we're involved or not depends on the co-investors and the other advisors that they have, because we never invest alone. So in some cases, we'll be co-investing with investors that have more expertise in your industry or are closer to you just geographically or personally, and they will be more hands-on in helping you, coaching the company, mentoring the founders, like using the Rolodex and opening up doors, relationships. And then we play more of a partial role. And other companies will do the opposite, like we'll be more hands-on. We'll talk to them almost every day, help them with product strategy, with hiring. I think a constant across all of our companies is we help them with their fundraising strategy. Our goal is really to be the firm, like our expertise isn't sectorial. Our expertise is partly geographic as we focus on the Canadian ecosystem, but our expertise is to get companies from pre-seed and seed to Series A. So what does that mean in terms of your strategy, of the metrics you need to show, of how you pitch the company once you start getting traction, but even more importantly, like what investors do we introduce you to once you start showing progress, and kind of how you time that and how you plan your next rate of fundraising is something that we pretty much do with all of our companies.
So just two quick questions I can add to that. So is that your exit plan on the one hand, and secondly was that I heard from friends, and I've heard much about you, and is that I've heard that you had some background in music or entertainment industry before, and that's kind of, well, it's unrelated to what it is now, but that's sort of like some of the personal expertise or interests you may have had. And like, am I correct about this?
Okay, so your second question is what personal experiences we have and I have. Like I did work in the kind of music tech sector, so I have some expertise and experience there. But our company was also a web platform on a SaaS business model, so I understand well the SaaS metrics, SaaS business model. My partners that have worked, their experiences in the past have been enterprise software. One of my partners ran a marketplace for photography that was acquired by Getty. My other partner worked in telecom. I have a partner who worked at Samsung in Korea for a while. So we have and via our past investments, like I've worked with probably definitely dozens of companies in the past. Like we've built specific experiences, but more importantly, even relationships, like networks of relationships in different industries that we can leverage to help our companies.
Fantastic.
So, and the first part of your question was
about when you mentioned about the rounds. Was that sort of suggesting that there was an exit after the Series A, or was that just part of a continuation strategy to make sure that
that's a really good question. Like we're early investors, right? So so typically you guys see that little cursor, right? Can you guys see that little hand? So typically the exit will come later. Like we invest here, right? Pre-seed, seed. Companies will build value and hopefully grow over time, get to Series A. Sometimes companies will exit like here, and then we'll get our money back. But usually these are not the best outcomes. Like usually it means that the company is not growing as quickly as everyone was hoping, or they're not generating revenue and they end up getting acquired for maybe a few million, and maybe we get our money back or part of it, or maybe we get twice our money, which is good, but not what we expect and that we would go for. But more importantly, our exit or our liquidity will either happen at the IPO when a company gets listed on the stock market, and then our shares become liquid, so we can sell them over time. Or more often, the company will get acquired and hopefully get acquired later by a large player, and then we get our money back in the acquisition. What also happens sometimes is that at the Series C or D, they're like more and more a phenomenon in the last years is that companies IPO much later. So if you followed companies like Uber, like it took forever, or Spotify even. So sometimes at the rounds, the Series D and E, there are investors that focus on these later stages, and they're willing to buy what we call secondary shares from the early investors that were here, or sometimes the employees. So it's kind of a quasi IPO. So sometimes we might exit at these stages. But to be honest, like our goal is really to get companies to the best Series A. When they get their Series A done, typically they get a new lead investor. They're going to get a new board of directors, new advisors. So in most cases, we won't be that involved when the exit comes, except maybe for the early ones that aren't the best outcomes. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Okay, so where was I? Okay, so I was about to. All right, I'm trying to move this window. Okay, good. So what do VCs look for? What are we looking for when we meet a company? Like these are the criteria. I'm gonna go into more details for all of those, but this is how you pitch your company, and this is true whether you have 30 seconds at a cocktail to introduce yourself and your company to an investor. The narrative you're going to use in that 30 seconds and the narrative you're going to use when you have an hour in an investor's office, like it's the same. Like whether you have to do it in 30 seconds, your elevator pitch as we call it, or you have more time, you have to go through these themes. And if you're able to get an investor excited and positive on all these themes or all these questions, there's a good chance you're going to get a minimum get a second meeting. So if I get into more details, the first thing we look for is and I'm going to speak about us, right? About like Panache Ventures, early stage investors. We're looking for big outcomes because we know we're going to have a lot of failures in our portfolio, so that we're going to need our winners in the portfolio to compensate for the few ones that we're going to lose or we're going to be disappointed with. So each one of them, like said very simply, when we meet them, like we need to know that they're going after a billion-dollar opportunity. That might be a caricature. Like obviously we know that not all of our companies will become billion-dollar companies, but we're looking for these types of big ideas. So you're working on an idea that is addressing a very important problem that's affecting like a large industry or many industries, but a lot of people. And we need to be able to predict that if you're able to build it, like they're going to want it, or someone's going to want to pay for it. There's going to be some monetization. There's going to be some revenue generation. We want to see passion, and I kind of wrote it in all caps 3 times because that's super important. Like at the early stages, like we're not investing in a company that has a lot of assets, that has a lot of revenue, a lot of customers. There's not a lot of equipment. Like we're investing in people. We're investing in ideas and brains. And we need to understand that you're super driven by your project, that you dream about it. Like we need to understand that it's keeping you up at night, and that you won't let go before you've seen your vision achieved. We want to see some customer validation. Like to think that you have a big idea is one thing, but to have it validated by potential users and customers, either because they already paid for it, or they're willing to use your prototype, or you've surveyed 1,000 people and 500 said they would want to use what you're building, or have a look and play with it, potentially invest or buy it. Like that's what we need to like instantly get from the first few minutes that we talk to the founder. Then we're like, why you? Like why? Okay, it's a good idea. Makes sense. There might be an opportunity, but why would it be this founder and this team that is able to solve that problem? So there we look at the experience. Like, do you come from the industry? Like, how did you identify the problem or the opportunity you're working on? So what's your track record? What's your experience? What's your education? I like to see founders that say, I was in the industry, I needed something, it did not exist, or the solutions that existed were suboptimal, and we've built something that is much better that we figured for ourselves, and then we figured out that the whole industry would need it. That's the kind of story that we like seeing. And again, like that brings passion and about the project. We like to see teams that are complementary. Like typically we love seeing, and at the early stages, there's always some missing parts to the team, obviously, because teams are very small, but some mix of, technical, scientific, development, product, smarts, someone that has more of the design, sales, marketing aspects, someone that has more of the design at the product level, user experience, user interfaces. Like we like to see complementarity within the team. And then we like to work with people that we get along with. Like personality fit is important, where this is a long-term relationship that's going to be pretty intense over the next 2 or 3 years, and then maybe all the way up to 10 years. So we like to work with people where we feel like we can trust them and just have a good time when we work with them. So then after we've seen like what is the market opportunity, or what's the problem you're addressing, and who you are, like what did you build or what are you building? Like we want to understand that what you're building is unique, the product is technology, like how does it address the problem, and what we look for is, I kind of paraphrase it as saying 10x. Like I like and like again, it's just a way of saying things, but are you building something that fixes the problem 10 times faster, or is it 10 times cheaper, or 10 times better in a way, or more efficient or optimized? So we're not looking just for small incremental upgrades to existing technology and solutions. We're looking for game changers, and looking for something that's going to be so good that people are going to want to use it and eventually pay for it. So then we look at what's unique about it. Like, is there intellectual property that you have that no one else has? Is it technology, like some kind of technology secret? Is it the team that you have that no one else is able to get? Is it sometimes it's just branding, or it's just a different product and the ability? Sometimes it's network effects in what you're building. Sometimes it's algorithms. Like a lot of investment in AI is built around that premise that machine learning models, if you're able to build the right models and get access to proprietary data sets, and then keep adding to that data as your technology develops, your algorithms become, or your models become more and more accurate, which allows you to keep ahead of the competition. So, so we kind of look for these models where there's going to be defensibility and erecting moats as you progress. And then we look at what the competitive landscape is. Like, is it, do you not have any competition? Which sometimes means there's no market. If there's no competition, often that means that there might not be a market for what you're building. But who is the competition? Are you competing, head to head with Google and Amazon? That might be tough. Are you competing with smaller players, or like older players that are legacy systems that are outdated, and you're able to be 10 times better, cheaper, faster? That's kind of what we look for. Any questions up to this point?
Yes, we actually have a question from Facebook. So the question is, since Panache gets smaller checks from my understanding, how many other VC partners are your sweet spot to be involved with a later stage company?
Well, at our stage, we will typically invest, and I should have said that earlier, we'll typically invest between, like it's ranged between $100,000 to $500,000 to $500,000 as a first check in a company. But that's part of a round, a larger round that will be typically between, let's say, $1 million to $2.5 to $3 million. So we will co-invest with other firms. Usually, and sometimes angel investors or family offices or corporate.
Hello?
Or golden ventures that we will will sometimes write seed checks with us. So it varies. Typically, we like to see at least, let's say, between 2 to 5 co-investors. We don't like to see 10 plus, because that's messy and that messes up the cap table. And then as companies progress, each round might add 1 or 2 new later stage investors. I don't know if I think I answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was pretty straightforward answer.
So okay, so now we've looked at the problem, we've looked at the team, we've looked at the solution you've built, or the technology, the product. Then we're gonna take a step back and look at the market and kind of understand it better. Like, are you going after a large market or a niche market, which is not necessarily a bad thing if the niche is large enough? We look at the business model, and sometimes like early stages, the business model is not yet refined, and that's fine as long as you understand that you're asking yourself the right questions. Like how are you going to get revenue? Is it a subscription? Is it advertising? Is it just people buying a product or your service? How are you going to reach them? Like how are you going to acquire them? Is it through trade shows or salespeople, through Facebook, Google advertising? Really depends. Like, and again, like you might not have a lot of data early on, but we want to make sure that you understand that acquiring customers bears a cost, and that the revenue, so the lifetime value of the revenue you're gonna get needs to be much higher than the cost of acquiring them. So we try to figure out what kind of scale you can reach, and obviously that scale needs to be large enough. Like a lot of the opportunities and startups we end up passing on is often because we figure out that you can build a nice company, and it could be very nice, could be like multiple millions of dollars of revenue and profits, but not quite at the scale that we look for. Then we need to understand who else, what is your competition? Like, is the market made out of like small players or large players, or like who else are you going to be competing with for those dollars? And a big question, super important question, is the timing. Like, why bring this technology and this product to market now? Like we often see companies that are too late in going after a market because the market's already dominated by large players, or it's already mature, and the customers already have something, a solution, so that's going to be hard to displace. But also sometimes we see technologies that are too early. The market's just not ready. Like sometimes you're going to have something that's version 3 of a market that's still in version 1. So and it might be too early for us to invest, because then you're going to have to evangelize, or like you've built a solution for a problem that people don't know exists yet. So we try to understand if you're like how your timing is for bringing your technology to market, and that's a very important criteria. That's pretty hard to decipher. And then lastly, it's what's the plan? Like, what's your fundraising plan? How much you're raising? Big question is usually we will invest to give a startup enough liquidity for the next 18 to 24 months. So we want to understand, like, what are you going to use the money for? Is it like all marketing spend? So it's all going to Google and Facebook? Or is it, or are you going to hire like developers, engineers? Like it's hard to predict a startup's revenue over the next 18, 24 months, but it's fairly easy to predict the startup's expenses. So we want to understand what those are and where you think that will get you. So 18 months from now, like what metrics or what milestones do you think you're going to hit? And then how does that lead into potentially your next round? We want to understand the fundraising history, like who else has invested, who are the shareholders on your cap table, and who is investing now. Like, do you already have investors that are interested, someone that's interested to lead your round? Are they strategic? Are they folks we know? Do they have a good track record? Are they good folks that we're going to want to work with? And then the question was asked earlier, can we add value? Does it make sense for us to be involved with this company? Are we going to be able to help? And then we want to understand what you feel is going to be the end game. Like, what do you want to do with this? Like, I always ask the question, like, where you want to be when you grow up, or where are you going to be 5 years from now? Like, we want to understand that the right answer is, I'm going to build $1 billion company. But what does that mean? Like, do you feel like you're building something that's going to end up getting acquired by a large player, or you're going to be in a position to be the one acquiring smaller players and maybe eventually IPO? Like, obviously in the early stages, this should be somewhat cloudy or unclear, because you still have a company to build before you get to that. But we want to understand what your motivation and ambition is. So that's kind of the broad set of criteria that we look for. And if we're able to convince ourselves, and you're able to convince us, and I'm able to convince my partners and my investment committee that you've got something that fits all of this, it's likely we're going to be interested in investing. And that's how and these are the themes. Like if you ask yourself, I'm going to build a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote to show investors, like your slides should be around these themes, because that's what investors want to see, and that's where you're going to see a lot of questions. And contact info, you can you see my email there. You can add me to LinkedIn, but I want to open up the floor to questions. And questions can be about what I've just shown here, can be about our firm, can be about venture capital in general, can be about anything, ideas of how to keep the kids busy during confinement. I have a bunch of those.
We'll get to the kids part soon, but I have a couple of questions. So just because I think we learn a lot from mistakes and from other people's mistakes as well. Would you mind sharing like some of the worst things you've seen as a startup approaching a VC?
Well, the thing is, the most common mistake is thinking that your project is venture backable, and thinking that it needs venture capital. Like venture capital has got I think is way too, what's the word I'm looking for? I think venture capital has a very strong brand. Like people kind of see it as this magic unicorn that will help companies thrive and grow and become the next Shopify. The truth is that a very small percentage of startups will be able to raise venture capital, and an even smaller percentage of startups that raise venture capital will be able to become big successes. So there's something to be said about companies that are able to grow organically by maybe raising a little bit of money, but a lot of non-dilutive. Like in Canada, we're privileged because there's a lot of programs that we have access to that are either non-dilutive or very cheap to get into. And a lot of companies are able to grow just with their revenue and organically and remain independent. And, Banzool, the company that I was leading for 5 years, is a company like that. Like today, it probably generates, when I left, we were getting close to 5 million, but also now probably generates between 6 and 8 million. So it's grown organically. It's very profitable because it has low overhead, but never raised any outside funding. So to think that VC is mandatory for a startup is a big mistake. Coming to another big mistake is not understanding the different type of investors that are in the ecosystem. Like investors like us, we're looking for billion-dollar outcomes because we know we're gonna fail often in our investments. So the non-failures need to be huge. So at day zero, when I meet you, you need to convince me that you can be one of our big successes. Other investors are in this for different reasons. Like they might be they might have a economic development mandate, and they want to invest in specific geographic areas or specific sectors. Angel investors sometimes will invest where they feel they can help and may not be looking for the same type of outcome. So really to educate yourself on the ecosystem and on who you're talking with and what they look for is important. Otherwise, we could spend a full day about like big mistakes that people make. But yeah, the most frustrating is that we get people reaching out to us when it's clear that they haven't even checked out our website, because it would be clear that it's not a fit with us.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool. I don't know if there's any other questions. Anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate. In the meantime, I'll just continue asking a couple more questions to David. So how did you see the landscape change with COVID? Like, how did that affect? Like, you've mentioned it briefly, but can you explain a bit more? What was your approach with the crisis situation?
Well, so two things. Like the first thing is internally, like we have like I said, a portfolio of more than 60 companies. So the first few weeks, everyone was kind of traumatized or under shock by being forced to stay home and not see their friends and family. And for venture capitalists, what it meant is going to the portfolio and seeing who's affected the most. Like we have, like for example, we have one of our startup that builds technology for like Airbnb and short-term rental property managers. So their like their market suddenly disappeared. Kind of said like other companies that we had that had CPG that were relying on supply chains from China got disrupted as well. And especially our companies that had like 6 months and less of runway, like we spent a lot of time with them to see how they could extend their runway is the number of months of liquidity that you still have before you run out of cash and can't make payroll. So so the first few weeks we're kind of triaging the portfolio and seeing like who's affected. Now that I think that kind of that crisis has receded and we've seen that the stock market has kind of come back. It's kind of hard to predict where it's going to go because the big question is post-confinement, like what kind of recession we're going after. And in our case, it worries us a lot more than COVID and confinement because in a recession, sales cycles get much longer. Fundraising might be harder to do for startups, but also for ourselves when we go fundraise our next fund. And so it's been a matter of like making sure that our companies that were on say 9 months of runway and liquidity have found ways to extend that to at least 12, 18 months. Sometimes that means reducing expenses, which means maybe getting rid of some employees or negotiating salary decreases. It's also meant gaining access to all that's available in terms of non-dilutive and government and emergency help, delaying rent because you're not in the office, things like that. And yeah, to make sure that if there's a recession and things get tougher, we're going to be able to get through this. In terms of new investments, like of course I spoke, I mentioned earlier, let me go back to it, the themes. And some of our companies are in these sectors, right? So we have companies that have tons more opportunities because of this, but now we need to understand, like one of our companies enable live commerce, so live shopping. So brands like L'Oreal now use them to create events with influencers, where influencers were talking about a new kind of lipstick and you can click and buy it. Like their market has kind of exploded because of confinement. Now we're trying to predict if it's going to be sustainable once malls reopen and people can start shopping again. So yeah, it doesn't change like our horizon because we're early stage is like our companies are going to exit in 2027, 2028. So by that time, we expect that the effect of the pandemic and recession will be mostly over, but we still try to predict what a post-COVID world looks like.
Yeah. We have a question from Fabien. Fabien, you're allowed to talk.
Yeah. Bonjour, David. Thank you for your time and for your presentation today. Question for you. You mentioned in your presentation that one of the distinctive features of Panache is that you have proprietary deal flow. Can you speak about this concept and about how, I guess, you source your deals on that basis?
Yeah, absolutely. When we say proprietary deal flow, it's kind of marketing speak for our investors because we tell them we're going to have access to companies and founders that few people have access to. How we get access to these deals and companies is kind of twofold. Like there's the deal flow that we get from the world of accelerators, incubators, like structures like Zoo is a good example. And what I'm doing today now, I'm sure is going to bring all kinds of new deal flow to me. Same with like we're involved with a lot of the accelerators you would know, like the Founder Fuel, the Techstars, Y Combinator, 500 Startups, obviously. So a lot of deal flow comes from these source that aren't exactly proprietary because you just need to show up at demo day. We're going to see all the startups. But being involved, we do get proprietary information about the founders and how they answer questions and how they progress over the course of a cohort or program. So that's one thing. And typically, these founders that are in these programs are first-time founders, and they need and they want the coaching and the education. So that's one part of the deal flow. And there we're like what we say is we're very active. We're involved with most of the good accelerators in Canada, and even outside of Canada. The second half that is harder to get is repeat founders. like founders that, like I said earlier, that have had the exits before, or that had key roles at companies that scale. Like usually these founders are in a position to pick their investors and start with, friends and families and angel investors they know, and then really pick investors that they know are going to be value adding and strategic for them. So there we need to work harder in order to get access to that deal flow. And that's deal flow that's coming from, a lot of it comes from our investors, because our investors are institutions, corporations, but also a lot of angel investors and family offices, like high net worth individuals. And they have access through their networks to deal flow that they then channel through us. But also our founders, like right now we have 69 teams of founders that are in touch with other founders they know in their industries or from their, from their past. And they know what we look for, and they know what value we can add. So deal flow we get from them is super important for us. And then from our co-investors, like we've done, and that's why we like doing deals sometimes outside of Canada, because then we end up investing with investors that we can bring into our deals that might be strategic, but also that will bring us more deals. And that's deal flow you can get only if you're active and people you're actively writing checks, but also they work with you, they know your reputation, they know how you can help, and that that is much harder to get. So that's why we call it proprietary.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there a question from Natalia?
Yes. Yes, hi. I was wondering also how often do you get projects within the fashion industry, and how are the investors willing to collaborate with companies that are within this industry that are doing like big changes post-COVID and getting all this big issues in the past that are coming to that are, how can I say that, like during COVID we noticed that a lot of fast fashion companies were not behaving very well. So I was wondering how investors are now informed about the industry, and if they are willing to invest on fashion industry.
So yes, fashion has been an industry where the last maybe 5 to 10 years I've seen a lot of investment. Like, and obviously it's a complex industry, and I'm not an expert, but on one hand you have pure play fashion brands that historically have been able to raise because where their innovation was not purely technology, like was not the technology, but really how they use technology to get to market. So for example, I don't know if it qualifies as fashion, but Warby Parker in eyeglasses, or locally Frank and Oak. Frank and Oak kind of got to market with a initially purely online model with a lot of targeting over mobile, which was still like a new thing back when it came out, and they were able to raise, not necessarily because their clothes and designs were better, but because they're nothing against Frank and Oak, but they're at the market. Like out of our first fund, we had invested into Majuri, which is a jewelry brand that is purely online, like more disintermediating the industry and going more direct to consumer, working with designers and influencers. So that's, again, the innovations, not necessarily in the earrings and the jewelry that gets designed, but how they get it to customers. More recently, like we've seen some technologies that are technologies for the fashion industry that help brands and retailers better predict demand. We looked recently at a company that was building a marketplace for fabrics. So there are technologies around, like fashion industry is a large industry that touches everyone, because I think more than 99% of the planet wears clothes. So technologies that serve it are super important. For purely fashion, like investing in a brand because a design is better or more, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Like that's tougher because you need to have very specific skills to be able to identify a new designer, a new brand, and say that's going to be the look of the future. That's not really a skill. Definitely that I don't have. Like, yeah, you can see on intro. Not.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Natalia? Yeah.
Yeah, you did. I was coming to that. Like, if innovation for you was only about, that was where I was going. If it was only about technology, but no, you just did. It's very important for me to know those details, as in the industry, in the métier where I'm at, is the least technological. Of the whole thing, but
my team in Toronto looked at a startup recently that was, I don't remember the name of it, but they had designed a travel dress that where the innovation was that it was like meant for backpackers that travel with small backpacks, and so it's easy to wash, but also a dress that you could like set up in different ways, whether you were hiking or whether you were going out. Like it would work for different depending how you were how you were wearing it, and so the innovation was in the product, and that like it was targeting a very specific segment. And I think they had or were doing a crowdfunding campaign that was super successful. So we didn't end up investing, but that's the kind of thing that we would look at because the innovation is very specific.
So after that, like, do you have any feedback from those companies that you invested on? What's the outcome and how these companies have developed after you're invested on them?
Specifically in fashion?
Yeah.
Because we haven't invested in specific fashion companies yet.
I can help you, David, answer this question. Hi, Natalia. We've seen your application, and I know you've recently been accepted at La Piscine program. And I think your approach, in terms of design, is really, really interesting. And I think the whole team agreed with that. And I think there is a market for you out there. And what you would focus on in the specific context of the program of La Piscine, because you're still in the early stages of your development, I would say, is to focus on the type of profile of people that would need your type of design. And then from there, how can it become a more scalable approach? And then it would be more interesting for VCs. So focus on those defining better those clients that you're going after, and then from there you can start defining how you can scale your design to more and more people.
Because if you go back to earlier in my presentation, like that might be the tough part for fashion. Is like how's this a big enough, like is it something that. And again, I know nothing about your project, so I'm making assumptions that like that dress I mentioned, like they were in theory we could have convinced ourselves that it was addressing a large problem because there's like millions of backpackers every year that don't have a dress that fits all of their needs. So it is a big idea. I think we ended up figuring out that it was still pretty niche, and maybe the price point wasn't aligned with the type of a customer they were targeting. So yeah.
Thanks, Natalia. I hope we're
amazing. Thank you for your input.
Right. You're welcome.
I don't know if you mind taking, because we only have 1 minute left, and Laurent has a question that he's asked. So Laurent, that will be the last question.
Okay.
By the way, if people have more questions, you can always shoot me a quick LinkedIn message, and I'll try to answer them best I can.
Okay. I was wondering, like, in your fund, who are the biggest or the most important LPs, like money for you invest?
In our case, our largest LPs are Investissement Québec, Fonds de Solidarité, Alberta Enterprise, which is a fund out of the Alberta government, and we have a consortium in the Yukon of the Yukon government and a coalition of 7 of the First Nations of Yukon that have invested in our fund. And then we have investors like TELUS, National Bank, Bank of Montreal, BMO, and then a long list of family offices and individuals.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Laurent. On that note, I want to thank you, David, for taking the time this morning
Merci, Marc.
for sharing this presentation with us. This was really great. I've definitely learned a lot from it, so I hope everybody else did. I wish you all a great rest of the day and the rest of the morning, and I hope to see you guys very soon again. We'll keep you posted. Stay in the loop with all the next events that we'll be organizing. There is a lot of new approaches that we're going to be experimenting with, a lot of new themes. So I would highly encourage you to join our newsletter, follow us on social media, do all this stuff so that you are the first to know on the new approaches. So have a great day. Thank you, David.
Thanks, everyone. And for those of you in Montreal, stay cool and stay safe.
Yes,
It's going to be a hot one.
absolutely.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.